Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014. We are in Times Square, New York City at the Marriott Marquis Hotel. With me now is Pat Clemency. Her seminar topic is the event pipeline, turning event guests into major donors. Pat is president and CEO of Make-A-Wish Metro New York and Western New York. Pat Clemency, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony.
It's a pleasure to have you. You have a pretty disparate territory, New York City and Western New York.
It's an interesting territory, but I think it really is empowering in the sense you get a chance to see all sorts of markets in which you can raise money. And it's really the opportunity to understand how donors react in their markets. And you know what? The universal is they all want to make a difference.
And how far west does Western New York go in your
we cover the major cities of Buffalo and Rochester and 17 counties.
It does go all the way to Buffalo.
It does.
Okay.
It does. And so we don't have the middle of the state, but we have New York City and Nassau County and then 17 counties upstate.
What do you see that nonprofits are not quite getting right around events and transitioning donors from events?
Well, I think, we all start with special events. I mean, there's no question about it. But I think it is the recognition that there is a discipline that can make those events work harder and smarter and are part of a major gift strategy. If we see it as an event that we efficiently come into and go out of without seeing its capacity to build a pipeline of donors for other kinds of fundraising, particularly major gifts, I don't think we make it all that it can be. And so today we really had a great dialogue around the issue about some of the things that we can do to make a special event. 3 distinct parts. It matters deeply what we do before going into the event.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about planning, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But planning in a different way that really makes us understand who is coming, who are the prospects. But the day of the event, how do we really connect the donors, not just with the event, but with the mission and how they can make a specific difference, and how we then engage them in the journey, not with the event, but with the organization over time, is really the third ingredient in that. And so it really is very helpful to think about it as more than simply the event itself.
Pat, I'm going to ask you to talk even closer to the mic, because we have the background noise, because the lunch is over, so stay nice and close so we don't pick up too much outside background noise. Well, let's start with the natural place of planning. What should we be doing as we're planning the event to be planning for transitioning attendees to our donor ranks?
I think all too often we start with logistics rather than the strategy. What are we trying to do? And who are we trying to attract? And we also need to cast a wider net. If you think of the donor pyramid, I mean, we're looking at our past event guests and hoping people who will be new to the event will also come, but we're not looking for the clues that people give us. And so we found there was great opportunity looking at direct mail donors who gave $100 or more. And when we did some wealth screening, we found out they gave us $100, not because that was their capacity, but we had a box and they checked it and they gave us $100, but we understood that when we looked at it, they had so much more capacity, but we never got around to asking them. So looking a little bit more broadly and thinking about the strategy of engagement, so we basically said if you look at an event just as a single time, we're going to invite them again next year, but if we look at the event and overlay a lot of the major gift strategies, we have the ability to change that whole dynamic. Your loyalty won't be to the event, it could be to the institution, and it would be a longer-term engagement if we get that right in the planning stage.
That's what we want, right? We don't want them just coming up year after year.
Right.
And does this include people who come, they may only come one time because they're connected with the honoree or just a friend of the organization brought them? Can we convert those kinds of people?
Well, it's very interesting. We learn a lot from our Buffalo and Rochester offices because they have a very different evergreen strategy. Honorees are looked at differently than we look at them in New York City, and they are honored for a body of work. So as a result, most of their strategy is thinking about how do you get the same donors to renew at higher levels each and every year. So now we're beginning to implement that and saying, regardless of the honoree, how do we get more of our sponsors to renew? And then for those one-time donors who come because of a gala honoree, we need to do some more screening and think about who else in our boards within the Make-A-Wish family knows them so that the relationship can transition to the organization, not simply around the honoree.
What else can we learn from Rochester and Buffalo?
Well, you know what I think is the universal is people want to make a difference. And we just have to make sure that we're not leading with what we need, but we understand that the first conversation is the donor's needs. And the donor wants to be able to make a difference. Our job is to take them on that journey by showing them how, and treating them like an investor. And that is a really key difference. Very often we ask for what we need, and we never think from the donor perspective, what about the organization will really resonate with them for the long haul?
Do you really feel that upstate or Western New York is better than downstate New York at this? Or?
No. I mean, their scale is very different than ours. I mean, it's a smaller scale. But I think the best thing about fundraising is if we are open to understanding that best practices exist everywhere, they learn from us, we learn from them. Okay. And I think it's fine. But I think the interesting thing is, in every market, if you begin to institute this practice of looking at event donors, not just as donors for an event on an annual basis, but really, truly look at it as a pipeline, we have seen donors go from $1,700 to $10 million, or from $5,000 to $500,000.
Yeah.
It isn't a journey overnight, but the fact of the matter is some of our very largest major gift donors, their entry point was at an event. It was how we dealt with that made all the difference as to whether or not that became a continued transaction. We sell a ticket, you come to our event, or if it really became a transformational relationship with the mission of the organization.
Are there specific things that we should be doing in our planning aside from the concept of the lifetime donor, the longer term relationship? Are there things specific to, I don't know, to the invitation, to who invites them, how they're invited? What before the event, what else should we be doing specifically?
Well, we began talking about if we were to really make this part of our major gift strategy, what are the shifts that we need to make? And when you think about it, our invitation is to an event. We needed to even change the messaging. We are not just inviting you to an event. We are inviting you to share and join in this extraordinary mission. And that's very subtle, but it's a very big difference. And so we even changed the fact that when you come to a gala, as a perfect example, think about how we spend the first hour. At cocktails, just kind of wandering around.
Right.
Instead, registration is outside. So the minute you enter the doors, you are coming in and part of a community of like-minded people who believe that this is some of the most important work we can do for kids. And you are meeting wish families and volunteers and board members who are searching you out as the guest that evening. And that first hour becomes a really important message about we welcome your involvement in this remarkable work.
Well, how do we convey that message in our cocktail hour?
Well, it's really about storytelling and changing who tells the story. And so if you think about it, very often at a gala, whether it is during the cocktail hour or it's during the main speeches of the night, we're putting up the CEO, we're putting up the board chair, and we're talking about the past. We're actually talking about statistics and how much money we raised, and in our case, how many wishes we granted. When we change the dynamic of who the storyteller is, really should be the people who experience the mission firsthand. And as we tell the story through their eyes, it says to a donor, here's exactly what your donation would do. Here's exactly how it makes a difference in that moment and for a lifetime. That's a very different relationship from the beginning of the point where that donor enters the gala.
If we're going to focus on storytelling at our events, and it might be a very big one, very big gala, or it might just be a smaller,
could be anything.
Some kind of smaller gathering, maybe even a meeting.
Absolutely.
We need to, sounds like, have a very consistent message that the leadership is conveying, and that trickles down to all the employees, and then also the board is conveying, right? I mean, we need to have consistency in messaging.
Well, you have to have consistency in a couple of things. I think you have to have consistency in messaging for sure. But you also have to build a culture where the board and the staff are engaged in thinking about who's there. You know, there's not a throwaway seat at any event. And when you think that it matters most, there is a greater level of engagement on the part of the board and the staff and the pre-work that gets done. Who's at those tables? Who should we know? How do we welcome them? What would be important to them? And it allows boards to be successful. You know, so many times we hear from board members, I've given you every contact I have. There's nobody else I can approach. Well, this empowers boards to reach out to other people that the organization knows and be champions that night for the cause.
So they're assigned. We're assigning people to to meet specific people during the evening, during the event.
Absolutely. And beyond that, you're the eyes and ears. Every single person has a role, kind of just surveying the room and learning what they're hearing that night and reporting it back. So just as we schedule an event on a day, before that event takes place, we also have the debrief date by which board members, volunteers, staff get together. What did you hear? What did we learn? And very often one piece of information about somebody who was in the room is magnified then by another piece of information. And out of that then becomes the thought, okay, the event is over, but it's only really beginning in terms of engaging that donor long-term now in the life of the organization. And so part of that debrief is what's next? What are some of the opportunities? And you're right, we have to be on the same page. If someone were to say to us post-event, I'd love to be involved, how? We all have to be able to convey what the options are, and there are many, and there's not going to be one that works for everybody, but everybody needs to know, here are some of the ways that you can be involved on an ongoing basis.
So we've transitioned from beginning the planning stage to day of now. We're at our event. What else? Popped a little bit there. Sorry, that was a little loud. What else should we be thinking about or executing the day of to create this transition?
Well, I think the other thing that you can do very, very well is start with the strategy. What's the message that you're trying to convey that should be the thread of connection to everything that's being done that night? And for us was really talking about the ripple effect of wishes. And the ripple effect of wishes is it's a moment in time, yes, but it also has a lifelong impact. So one of our speakers was a 35-year-old executive with a Wall Street firm. He was a wish child 17 years ago. And so the impact for him was it had a ripple effect through his life, the life of his brother, who they really had a hard time. When he was diagnosed with cancer, as the family would tell you, everybody's diagnosed with cancer. You know, so everybody has cancer, it feels like. And so the thread of connection of his wish was in that moment with his brother, but it was also over his life. He became a wish-granting volunteer, helping others. But imagine his role, now explaining to people in his way that this investment that you will make tonight in support of this event has an impact to come on the future generation of kids who are just like me. That's an amazing way to tell the story. So the first part is, what are we trying to do? We were trying to show the ripple effect over time, across families, in communities. And so all of those voices were part of the program. That once that strategy is set, you can always worry about the logistics next. But you've got to get that piece of it. And too often in event planning for the night of, we think about the logistics, but we haven't really thought about the strategy. And that's what we lead with. And that storytelling is just one part of it. The next is, if you've told the story, then you've got to provide a tangible way for people to make a difference. And so we do a lot of fundraising that night, but it's not around an auction for things. We had one great item this year, and the rest is all about an auction to allow people to sponsor wishes. And that's the meaning of it. You go from the program which told the story from the perspective of families who had experienced it, and then give people the opportunity to share and join in the mission by sponsoring a future wish. It was incredible to watch. We had little star ones, and some donors sponsored a season, 4 wishes in a year, $25,000 donations in the room, an individual wish, right down to $1,000. And watching the room light up every time somebody was part of that community that was making a difference was really an extraordinary thing. It allowed people to know that this was a really special thing, that in this time and place, we were all making a difference.
I'm going to ask a little, just sort of a digression, just about the logistics of that auction for wishes. Did you have people predetermined that would be bidding on any of those auctions and those wish auctions?
Well, what we thought about was, how could we make...
And I don't mean to suggest the whole thing was rigged.
No.
Did you have one or two people who you knew would get the ball rolling?
They were all legitimate bids. We wouldn't do that. But there's a couple of things that we were able to do before, Tony.
Okay.
So 3 board members came forward and said, for new donors who've never made a donation before to Make-A-Wish, the ability to come and make a difference for a child, that's a pretty important thing. But how much more would they feel the impact of that initial donation if we came up with a challenge match? So 3 of our board members got together and $175,000 was put up in advance. They pledged this, and they would match donations up to $175,000. So that was a huge thing. We also knew from a couple of donors that the wish auction, for somebody who couldn't be at the gala, they were out of town, was still a way to participate. So for people who weren't there and wanted to participate, that's part of our culture now, to always have this opportunity to give, even if you can't be there. So we knew a handful of donations.
How did they do it? What did you do for the ones who couldn't be there?
So they have already pledged it, and they made that commitment right before. And so we let people know that we were able to do that. So those two things are done in advance. We know that if people know that the donation they make is going to be doubled, there's a likelihood that they're going to give a little bit more. And then the other one, to find a way to let donors who just cannot be there that night, how else can we participate? When it's about wishes, anybody can participate. And I think that helped as well. So that's kind of the two things we know going into the night. And then we announce that to the audience. And
then the third part of our trilogy story is after the event. What do we need to be now? Follow-up should be planned during planning, right? I mean, we should be thinking about what our follow-up is going to be while we're doing the advanced planning.
It is, but you're hearing a lot that night, and you're understanding what the individual journey might be for a donor. So we can talk about an overall strategy, but we're also listening to the donor's needs as well, and that we hear that night. So that's an important thing. But I think there's a couple of great examples. Our $10 million donor started out as a $1,700 event donor. He bought tickets to a Mets game where they were doing a benefit for Make-A-Wish. And to see the journey after some of the events, it was where he got to the transitional stage was when he was able to make a difference for the individual wish kids. So he began to grant wishes, and then began to think, well, if I could grant a wish, I wonder if I could do more. Then he began to grant a wish a month for 5 years, 60 kids.
Oh, my.
When you think about that. And then his attitude was, but I could inspire others by this, and I have to lead by example. So in his office building, he took down some of his paintings and put up something that we had designed, which was simply a tree acknowledging those wishes that had been granted. So simple first name of a child and a wish. And when you came up into his lobby, you immediately saw that this was somebody who was championing the cause. So he then, as he got closer, after having been an event donor, now he's making a difference for children. And so when it became time to start thinking about the next generation of wish children, in 2013, we were 30 years old and we had granted our 10,000th wish. And we had a big, bold dream for the future. We wanted to grant the next 10,000 wishes because we understood now importance and impact. We want to grant those 10,000 wishes in a decade. Well, how do you sell somebody on a big, bold dream? Well, you go to your best investors in the cause. And he said, well, I'd like to give you a down payment on the future. And that became the largest individual gift in the history of Make-A-Wish worldwide from an individual. And think about that for the future of this organization. Here was somebody who went from $1,700 to $10 million, but it was never about $10 million for him. It was about the ability to change 10,000 lives. And so you think we move from transaction, I give you tickets to this event because you gave me a donation, move to the transitional stage where we could say, thank you for making a difference for that child, to the transformational stage where thank you for making a difference for the future of the mission. That's where the journey goes if we take our special event and understand that each of those stages, the pre-planning, the night of, and what happens after, are all distinct but equally important segments that can help that donor journey.
Okay. We still have a couple minutes left. Anything you want to share? Well, hopefully you do have something you want to share that we haven't said yet.
Well, I think, one of the things that I was really struck by, we had our gala on June 12th this year. And there was a couple who had come forward, and they secured the honoree, and they were great in helping support the fundraising around him. And as I thought about sending a letter out to people to solicit funds from business colleagues and family and friends, I learn a lot when you see the letters they write. And this one just simply said, we got involved with Make-A-Wish because we learned about Micah, a 6-year-old who wanted to be a ballerina. We stayed involved because over the years we've seen hundreds and thousands of kids whose lives have been forever changed. And what I realized was, here was a couple who came to an event. It was a cultivation event, just learn about Make-A-Wish. And they heard that story, and that stayed with them. And now we have an event for which they were such an incredible catalyst as a couple. It raised $1.6 million.
Yes.
The fundraising they did was extraordinary. They've endowed a wish in perpetuity, and yet they never lost sight of the fact that it was at an event that was learning about that one child that touched them and made them want to do more. I don't think I really understood the power of their motivation until that moment, but when I did, I thought, that's the discipline that we need to put in place.
And that's the storytelling you were talking about.
The storytelling, the way in which we don't look at this as a transaction. It's so much more. An event can be so much more and can be such a powerful part about how we welcome donors into the extraordinary missions that we all support.
We're going to leave it there.
Okay, Tony, thank you.
My pleasure. Pat Clemency. She is president and CEO of Make-A-Wish Metro New York and Western New York. And thank you for bringing lessons from Rochester and Buffalo.
Thank you.
My pleasure. You're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014. Thank you so much for being with us.